Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to do something a little bit different, starting off a new series, something which I did about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago to be in fact, which was going around all the missing characters, units and all that for specific races and factions. A decent amount of things have changed over the 2-year period, and obviously now we're looking towards Warhammer 3. Now, none of these races from Game 1 and Game 2 will probably be playable at the very beginning. Well, modders will likely make them playable, but as we look towards the eventual Immortal Empires campaign, the combination of all 3 games, then they will be, and we'll start expecting some, well, cross-game DLC, hopefully. So with that, and obviously better mic quality, script writing and all that, I wanted to redo this series, and I want to start off with the Orcs and Goblins, mainly because there's a lot to talk about them. Now keep in mind, obviously it's Orcs and Goblins, so really the grand majority of stuff that is missing is mostly reskins. It's just that, really. Keep in mind that the Orcs and Goblins in the tabletop had one of the largest possible armies purely because of all the different subcultures, because obviously you've got Savage Orcs, Standard Orcs, Black Orcs, Night Goblins, Regular Goblins, and all that. So with all that being said, let's not waste any more time and jump right in. Now we're going to start off with the generic Lord choices, and this is going to be heavily reskin stuff, but as I said in the intro, in the tabletop, if you wanted to go full Savage Orc, you could. If you wanted to go full Night Goblin, you could, and I feel like it's kind of a shame that we don't have that option here, especially since reskins are kind of easy to do, at least I'm imagining. A Night Goblin Great Shaman, as you know, you want the spellcasting because sometimes the Night Goblin War Boss really isn't great. We have a Standard Goblin Great Shaman, but again, it's just the roleplay thing about it. So then we look towards a Black Orc War Boss. This is just the Lord choice variant of that of the hero choice, and again, it's just if you want to be playing as Grimgor, you want to have armies led by, well, Black Orcs, because it's kind of following his story, more or less. He gets the biggest and baddest orcs to join him. Again, for theme, it would be nice to have a Standard Goblin War Boss. It's just, again, for roleplayability, and I'm going to stop saying that because it's going to happen a lot. With that, we're also missing a Standard Orc Great Shaman, so just to have the Orc variant if you don't want to have Goblins with you. And finally, from the tabletop, we're also missing the Savage Orc War Boss and the Savage Orc Great Shaman, which, in all honesty, considering the fact that we have Wurzag and all that, you'd think that we'd be able to have a proper full Savage roster. We do, but we just missed the Lord choices, and it's a bit of a shame considering, well, you know, theme is always great. Thankfully, there's been great mods for that, but I know a lot of people don't use mods, so officially would be nice. It's just a basic reskin. Now, before we move on to the hero choices, there's also something else I want to talk about, which is that of the Forest Goblins. You see, they didn't really have a Lord choice and a hero choice by 8th edition, but there are some Forest Goblin characters which aren't in the game just yet, and they might be in the future through FLC or maybe even DLC, more than likely FLC, because they probably want to get some better known characters for DLC, and it would just be nice again to have access to that, as that way you can have a full Forest Goblin army. Now, they don't have a lot of units, because it's pretty much just the Spider Riders and, well, yeah, it's just the Spider Riders, but I've got some ideas in the future when we start looking to the unit section. Looking at the generic hero choices, there's obviously a few here. First up being the Standard Shaman and Standard Big Boss for the Savage Orcs, because once again, it's always kind of nice to have theme. Then it's just the usual stuff like a Night Goblin Big Boss, a Orc Big Boss, a Goblin Shaman also, because, well, you want the spellcasters to also be hero choices too if you're going with a theme, plus, you know, spellcasting is quite powerful in Warhammer, and it looks like it's going to be a bit more powerful in Warhammer 3, so everyone should pretty much get this. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not just the Greenskins, wait till we start covering the Empire. And again, just for the theme, it would be nice to have a Forest Goblin Spellcaster and a Forest Goblin Big Boss, just to be able to have the options there. It's basic, they were never really on the tabletop, but it would just be nice to have. Plus, they have made up their own stuff before, so it's not out of the realm of question. Now let's start looking towards generic units, and yes, while there are a lot of reskins here, there is also a few quite unique units that haven't been added in yet, and a lot of people are waiting for. So let's start off with the basic Goblins first. Right now we have access to the Archers, which weren't a unit on the tabletop, and then we've also got access to Spear and Shield Infantry. They used to have a lot more options on the tabletop, like for example being able to have Sword and Board, or just have Spears and just Swords. I would say that we really don't need the variant without the shields, but it would be nice to also have a sword variant, despite the fact that really the spears are the best one. It's really just to have something there, and that's pretty much it. Same thing for the Goblin Wolf Riders, as right now we have the bow version, we have the spear version. Really all that's missing is a sword and board version, which really isn't needed, let's be very honest about that, but I guess most completionists would want to say that it's missing. I've just realized that I did miss out a completely new unit, which is that of the Goblin Spear Chucker. It's a bolt thrower, which might not sound too special, but in the tabletop they were quite useful and a bit easier to deal with than, say, for example, the Rock Lobber, as on the tabletop, if you fired with a Rock Lobber, it could go to a completely different area, whereas the Spear Chucker actually acted as intended. It's because of that that they were so popular, and it's a shame that we still don't have the Spear Chucker, especially since we have pretty much every other piece of artillery and war machine that they could have, barring something else that we'll discuss soon. Now we can move on to the Night Goblins, which we have one reskin and two unique units. First off, the reskin is literally just a weapon choice. It's a Night Goblin with spear and shield, which it's weird that we don't have because they were so popular on the tabletop. We've just got them in the bow variant and the sword and shield version, but the spear variant was very, very popular. A lot of people would take them, mainly because you had the whole fighting for E-ranks thing, which obviously does not come into question here, but it does help to have some anti-large too, especially if you're going to play a Scar Snake and you want like just Night Goblins. Now we can look towards a unique unit, which is the Night Goblin Squig Gobber. Now, I don't recall this ever having rules, or maybe it was just experimental rules. I played a lot of tabletop, and I must say that I don't think I ever seen one ever played, though what we do understand, it was supposed to be an artillery piece with exploding squigs, and I mean that kind of sounds kind of cool. Some explosion artillery would be nice for the Greenskins, plus this was a Forge World unit, and they always kind of make them the mainstay stuff. They look cool, and obviously rule of cool is always really important here. I wouldn't say that the Greenskins need it, but it would be a nice addition, plus some variety, and obviously a artillery piece which is actually for Night Goblins is more thematic. Lastly, a Squig Herder. Now, how it worked in the tabletop is Squig Herders were supposed to be with the Squig Herd, surprise surprise, but this has happened a lot when it comes to Total War, where they separate the handler from the monster. Like, for example, the Skaven, the Rat Ogres are supposed to have Packmasters, but the Packmasters many years down the line then became a hero choice. Now, a Night Goblin Herder could be used to create a new hero choice in the future, say, for example, in the same vein as a Packmaster, where it'll be able to boost up your monsters in your armies and so on, which, I mean, sounds kind of fun, especially if we look towards the future with, like, Colossal Squigs and so on. It would be interesting to be able to have something to specifically boost it up. It would literally just be a carbon copy of the Skaven Packmaster, but just for greenskin stuff, which makes sense, I'd say. But now we'll look towards the Forest Goblins, and I believe that they're pretty much done when it comes to the 8th edition army book. I believe earlier editions, or possibly a White Dwarf supplement, had some stuff, and really, when it comes to that, it's just get rid of the spiders that they ride on and give them some options, so hand weapon and shield, or just basic hand weapons, spears and bows, and then you can have a bit of a theme. Obviously, there's not too much of a call for this at the moment, unless we get some Forest Goblin Lords and Heroes, and obviously a Legendary Lord would be nice, or a Legendary Hero at the very least. I'll be very honest with you, the Forest Goblins themselves were really good. The Spider Riders were great for siege rules and so on, but I never really used them. It was more, 8th edition was focused on hordes more than anything, and it wasn't too great to use. Though, obviously, in Total War, things are different, and they are used fairly decently, plus, it would always just be great to have a theme, so even if they'll have kind of strange stats, like they would probably be worse than Night Goblins, well, worse than normal Goblins, it's just there just if you want it. Moving on to the generic orcs, we're missing Spear Boys, which a lot of people have actually been asking for. I myself would love to see orcs with additional hand weapons, because that's how I used to run them back in the day. It was kind of useful in horde formation just to get extra attacks out there and so on. Both would be great. Again, it's literally just switching out a weapon and that's it. Again, these are probably not needed because, well, yeah, you know, it's just a basic reskin and we've already got some spears, but then again, those spears are goblins and the additional hand weapons are nasty skulkers, so it would just be nice to have an orc variant. Now we can move on to Savage Orcs, and really the only thing that's missing is one unique thing and two different weapon types. That would be additional hand weapons, because, you know, anti-infantry and so on, and a spear variant, because anti-large is always good to have, plus it was kind of popular back in the day to either have them with that or additional hand weapons. It's really strange not to see them with any of those options. Again, modders have been doing wonders when it comes to missing units, especially for stuff that really doesn't need a new model, just a new weapon. So yeah, hopefully in the future we'll see this. And lastly, when it comes to a unique unit for the Savage Orcs, well, there's the Big Stabber, but I honestly don't know how it would be implemented. See, what a Big Stabber is literally just a log with a really sharp rock attached to it. They've used it to kill carnosaurs and big monsters and so on, but I don't know how functionality would work when it comes to Total War. Like, it could be like a weapons team maybe, or just... I don't know. I honestly don't know. Its rule on the tabletop would be that it caused impact hits, which meant that you just did better charge damage if you translate it loosely, and it would do a decent amount of damage to the large stuff. So maybe as a weapons team, which would be pretty much only useful if you go to Lustria? I don't know, I honestly don't see a point in adding this out of everything that we've spoken about so far. Now, for the last category, we have Black Orcs, and then we'll move on to miscellaneous units that don't really fit onto a category. Black Orcs on the tabletop were a very interesting unit. Very few units in Warhammer Fantasy had this special rule, where they could pick their weapon loadout as they began. So, if you go into a round of combat, sometimes you might pick, oh, I want to be with a sword and board, or I want a great weapon, or I want additional hand weapons. It was up to you, depending on the round of combat. And instead, obviously, that's not been translated here into the Total War series, because I imagine that that would be kind of complicated, though a toggle might work. It's very strange, obviously. We only have the Great Axe version here, so it would be nice in the future to get like a standard sword and board or additional hand weapon. Really, it's just because, well, Grimgor is here and you'd expect more Black Orcs, or if in the future we get a Black Orc character, because that's still possible, then that unit could be implemented. It's just for some basic filler, you know, like I said at the beginning of the video, orcs just had variety purely because there were so many different types of orcs. Right, so now we can start looking to a more miscellaneous way, which are a lot of unique units. First up, we have the Mangler Squigs. Mangler Squigs are very destructive creatures. Think of it in a very similar way to how the current Night Goblin Fanatics works, but up the damage a little bit, as they were able to do a lot more damage. They could move around, they had a lot of rules on the tabletop, and they were just generally fun to have. I honestly think that Creative Assembly haven't added in Mangler Squigs because they don't know how to implement them, as they were their own unit, and they were able to be quite unpredictable. It was the whole random movement thing, which we know is not the case here. They've not added that type of rule into the game for obvious reasons. I do wish that they'd try and figure it out though, because, well, they're kind of cool, and rule of cool once again. Now we can move on to Snotlings, which kind of is a bit of a half-half thing, as we already have Snotlings with the pump wagons, but back in the day they were also a swarm unit too, which means that you could use them to pretty much just hold enemies down for like a turn. That was more or less their functionality, but it was interesting because obviously these were the smallest known greenskins. Also, they had a pretty good rule known as Exploding Spores, which did damage with no armor saves allowed, and that's pretty good, believe me. I'd lost all hope when it came to Snotlings, well, the standard unit variant, because they said that swarms would be too hard and so on, but now we have Nurglings, so obviously they have figured it out, which bodes really well for the future, as you know, giant rats and all the other things for loads of different factions. It just would be nice to have. Who knows what happens, but these were something that I kind of liked back in the day. And the last thing we're pretty much missing is the Colossal Squig. It's a big unit, as you can imagine. Well, it's got Colossal in its name. Another thing that was released through Forge World, which means that you wouldn't really see it a lot when it came to normal games and tournaments, but they're very impressive. Obviously, it's like having a squig version of a T-Rex, or even larger, I'd say more Dreadsaurian type of size. It's just something quite impressive, and really it's just getting the squig and making it huge, which already a lot of people have done with mods and so on, but again, some people want it officially. It could be worked around a little bit to have some other type of functionality. It would just be just one massive squig. The way I imagine it being used in Total War Warhammer would be, think of a Dreadsaurian, though make it a little bit frumpier, faster, and just allowing itself to throw its way through anything, which could be fun. It could be fun. It'd be a bit stronger than obviously like the Rogue Idol and so on, but the Rogue Idol has different functionality. It would really depend, but it's still pretty cool. Now we're going to start looking towards legendary characters, and I honestly don't think that we're going to get that much at this point, whether they are paid for DLC or FLC. Keep in mind that the Greenskins themselves already have 5 legendary characters. These are all legendary lords. And in all fairness, there's only so much that they can do, even with everything that we've discussed. I could see it being done in a way that they could introduce other characters as character packs, so you just pay like £2 or £3 and you get one legendary lord and that's it. Well, pricing would not be up to me, so I'm just coming up with a random number there, which could prolong longevity of different races and factions by adding in more playable characters with their own unique mechanics and so on eventually when the units run out. But we don't know if they're even going to do that. It's been suggested multiple times by the player base, so hopefully they'll take that suggestion. But anyways, let's start looking towards some possible characters. So obviously, first we'd have to talk about Gorbad Ironclaw, which, yeah, he's dead. He's been dead for a long time. In fact, the Imperial Province of Solent, when it was destroyed in lore, was destroyed by Gorbad. Though he was still playable in the 8th edition army book because Games Workshop and timelines are, you know. But he was a very fun character to use. In fact, while he was overcosted as most named characters were on the tabletop, he did have the best benefits as he acted as a banner bearer at the same time. He also had access to being able to upgrade as many orcs as possible to big guns, and he was fairly decent in a challenge, which is a duel on the tabletop. So the character himself was different. He was also well known to ride on a giant war boar, so you could kind of see him implemented into the Total War series very much with a big gun and cavalry focus to go around his rules, or at least that's how I kind of see him being done. And, you know, he had a cool model too. Cool models always kind of work. He would be different if it was cavalry focused too, especially for an orc, which was kind of rare, and it could provide some sort of new different playstyle, but that's just a basic suggestion there. Now we have a character known as Snagler Grubspit, which unfortunately I don't think he had a model. This was a very common occurrence with Games Workshop where they would release rules and just make it so you had to build up stuff. It was just kind of annoying, to be honest, because while I'm good with conversions, I don't want to do it for a named character. So what sets apart this character is that he was a forest goblin, one of the very few circumstances where forest goblins would be mentioned, and he was there based in the Drakworth Forest, which, you know, one of the biggest forests in the Empire and in the world. This was at a time that they were trying to establish another deity for the Greenskins, which would be like a spider deity for the forest goblins, which obviously makes sense. He was a hit-and-run character, and, you know, if eventually they're going to start implementing stuff of forest goblins and so on, you never know if Games Workshop are planning that for Old World, which then would come here for cross-promotion stuff, then this would be a great legendary character, though I don't think anyone's going to miss him if he doesn't show up. A legendary hero might be cool too. That's only if they don't want to do a whole Forest Goblin faction, as the Greenskins right now have no legendary heroes. Mind you, a lot of factions are missing legendary heroes at the very moment. Gatilla the Hunter was an interesting character, another one that you have to build and make yourself, but this one was kinda like... it was a hobgoblin without being a hobgoblin in a sense, the way they introduced the lore and all that. He had his own mob, these were known as the Howlers. They were kinda more warriors for hire, if anything. This is another mounted character, which was more of a skirmishing character. The army could be done in that type of style. In fact, he was able to buff up Wolf Riders, which was pretty interesting. Keep in mind that the Wolf Riders in the tabletop were top tier units, whereas obviously in Warhammer 2 they just die. But this is a standard character for all purposes, and if all the characters mentioned here were added in, that would take us up to 8 legendary lords, covering every single culture. Well, the standard orcs would be covered twice, because obviously Azag, but he's possessed, so kinda fits in his own thing. I don't think anything else really needs to be discussed, as the issue with Greenskins is, well, they're all kind of the same. There's not really that much distinction. The orc will always be very similar to the other orc. The black orc would be very similar to the other black orc. The goblin would be very similar to the other goblin, and so on and so forth, as it's kind of how Greenskin society was always based on. Greenskins, funny enough, did not have that many missing characters, or established characters, other than just a few here and there in a book, which had like a line or 2 lines. Nothing really too drastic. It'd be tough to say what could be a legendary hero. Maybe the Greenskins don't really need one, because, well, they always try to kinda push themselves to try and be the war boss as much as possible, so it kinda wouldn't make too much sense. It's not like the Skaven, where they will serve until the right moment. The orcs will just get angry and then just start causing problems. But with all that being said, that's pretty much it when it comes to the greenskins. This one was the more reskin heavy one, so I wanted to get this one out of the way first. There's going to be a lot more. We'll cover this pretty much hopefully leading up to the release of Warhammer 3, as that way we can just focus on other stuff like obviously gameplay and so on. But was there anything I've missed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and let's start a bit of a discussion. I don't want to talk about anything relating to, like, say for example mechanics, because I think the greenskins are fine. They are, well, greenskins. Like, they're pretty simple. I think they should be one of the most simplest to play and not have all these overdone mechanics, as it just kind of fits with the greenskin theme well, and, well, it just kind of makes sense. But yeah, like I said, let's call it a day here, and I'll see you all again very, very soon. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel has been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.